I, okay.
I save it to a file. It has to come from
is on page 1 in your handout. Balance sheet accounts, more on assets, liability, and equity accounts. And so the word table that you see here is giving you some definitions of different types of an account that you can set up in QuickBooks. And I've given you some descriptions and also some examples of what those accounts are. And so what a lot of people kind of get confused about is when you buy a piece of equipment, when do you make that a fixed asset versus when can you just expense that in your fiscal year? And that's an accounting designation, right? And so sometimes you may buy a printer for your district and it may be under a certain dollar amount. And so you could expense that for the year that you bought it, right? It just goes to equipment expense. But when there are assets that you buy that you will use, you wouldn't be able to use up the value of that asset within a year. That's when it becomes a fixed asset on your balance sheet. So these are going to be bigger types of equipment, vehicles, that kind of stuff that you're buying. And it's because you can't use the value of that asset up in a year, right? And so there are IRS rules about that. And so how we buy down the value of that asset is through depreciation expense, right? And so that's what I have defined for you here. We depreciate that asset over time. So I'm just turning to the next page. There's kind of more of the description up there. Are we pretty good at this point?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, all right. And so what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at the chart of accounts, and this is what I have seen other people do, and we can have a best practices conversation about that. You know, generally what I'm working with is I'm working with small businesses, right, that you know, are really into profit and loss, right, kinds of views of their data. But what you see here, what I have highlighted is a parent account. Do you see that 2017 Great Plains piece of equipment? And then as sub-accounts underneath, I have a sub-account called cost. And then I have a sub-account called depreciation. And the reason that I recommend that we set fixed assets up like that is so that you, businesses, your supervisor, your board, or whatever, can see what the remaining value of that asset is as you go through, you know, your different fiscal years. Because at some point, you're either going to sell that asset or you're going to depreciate it, you know, to zero, right? And then that expense stream will not be available to you for that next fiscal year, right? So that'll impact the profit and loss view of your district. So how does that sound to you? Is that how you're setting things up?
That looks
Sounds
smart.
great.
Yeah, I like this.
Okay.
So how do you figure out the depreciation amount year to year? Is that something you talk to an accountant about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
There's no like rule of thumb percentages.
You know, you could go online. I'm not going to recommend that myself. You know, there are IRS rules on depreciation. And so for my own company, I have an accountant do my taxes. And I think it's really stupid because some of the computer equipment that I buy, I feel like it's disposable. You know, like really, I have to depreciate this over time. I mean, what if I drop it, right? But anyway, but my accountant gives me that depreciation figure, right? That there are different depreciation streams. I mean, Excel does depreciation calculations and formulas. So if you know what the asset type is based on the IRS designation and what kind of depreciation calculation you could use, you could formulatically, you know, come up with a number from Excel. How do you all get depreciation numbers?
supervisor came in and was like, this is what it should be.
Okay,
We don't. I have a laser level that we've had, the district is on for over 25 years, longer than I've been there. It still shows up as a fixed asset, $10,000.
right, so that throws your balance sheet off, right? Yeah.
I just don't know how to fix it.
It doesn't have that value. And so, let me show you how you would put a depreciation expense number in. But that's tricky, right? Because that should have been depreciated over time.
Long ago.
And now that it's in QuickBooks, where you may put the offset to that isn't into depreciation expense, but maybe you make up an expense account like, you know, laser, no more value, but it's still gonna hit.
Right, okay.
It's gonna hit somewhere because there always has to be an offset. So, and I'm gonna talk about that a little bit. So I thought what I would do is just kind of quickly set up a new parent and sub account structure if you want to see me do that, or maybe you don't care. Okay, okay. Okay, so have you been looking at those chats? Am I missing questions? or- Okay, thank you, thank you. So I just made something up here, right? So I'm just gonna create a new structure. So I can do fixed asset. And always remember, if you're a little bit confused about these types of accounts, QuickBooks gives you a lot of good help, right? When you pick a different kind of an account. So significant, what useful life more than 1 year, right? A lot of self-training is available to you. And then I'm just going to click continue. And we have a numbering scheme in this company file. And I just gave it a name of 2021 no till drill. Now, there may be districts, and tell me if maybe this isn't true, where you don't have any of your fixed assets entered onto your balance sheet. Is anybody like that? Okay. So the reason that we like putting them in there is because it looks like a healthier balance sheet, right? And you keep all your numbers straight if you're going to sell it. So if it's brand or if it's old and you want to make an entry to sort of fix that, you would be clicking on, and I'm just doing the parent account now, so maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but you would enter that as an opening balance. So you would have to figure out if this piece of equipment is 3 years old and you bought it for $10,000, what would be the depreciated value of that piece of equipment now, right? Because you didn't expense it or depreciate it in those years. So you would put in what the current value of that piece of equipment would be. The offset to that transaction is that account in QuickBooks called opening balance equity. Have you bumped into that before? Opening balance equity. What that account is if you think about it, QuickBooks didn't know how you acquired that asset, right? Because it wasn't entered when the original transactions took place. So QuickBooks always puts stuff like that in an account called opening balance equity. It didn't know. It has to balance it on two sides. So that's how you would get things in. Now I'm just setting up the parent account right now. And then I'm going to set up a sub account structure underneath it. And this is the original cost, right? And I'm going to make that a sub account of. It's always so much fun to watch me type, isn't it?
Mhm.
And a sub account of.
So that's how I like to see that look, right, on your balance sheet. Now, I haven't entered any transactions against those accounts yet, but on page 2 in your handout, are you all using the fixed asset item list at all? So this is a choice for you if you're, this is a non-posting kind of transaction. So I'm going to the list command on the menu bar, and that's where your fixed asset item list lives. We don't have any entered at all in this new company. So I'm going to enter a new item. And so there are certain fields that are required when you're setting things up on this list. And do you see one of the required fields is you do have to have this set up on your chart of accounts if you choose to use this list, no-till drill. It's used, maybe the date that I bought it, I'll just say it's today. The cost, I'm going to say is $10,000. I think I got that in there right. You can see that you can also, when you sell that asset, you can keep track of that information here if you choose to on this item list form. The reason you might want to use this is because you can put right into QuickBooks things like serial number information, warranty information when it expires. You may want to type into the notes area, the insurance company information, right? Policy numbers, phone numbers. This is sort of like one-stop shopping for you to enter this into QuickBooks if you choose. So it's totally optional. I think I might have to have a purchase description in here. And so what I want you to see is that this is a non-posting transaction. Yeah.
So your asset account, is that an expense account or is that your chart of accounts? That's a fixed asset.
You see this right here? Yes.
So it's not an expense.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Mhm.
So they wash through it if they purchased it, but just purchase it.
So I'm just gonna close that list. Do you see how that's a non-posting transaction? Okay, so it's just your area if you chose to do that instead of Excel, or maybe you have all this stuff in folders or whatnot, right? If you wanted a digital place to go, you could. Okay, so you can see on my chart of accounts, you can see that I have my fixed asset parent and sub accounts on my chart of accounts. Are we good? Are you with me out there?
And so if you have it set up like that, it doesn't look as negative on your profit loss sheet, right?
Fixed assets don't show on a P&L.
But
They show on your,
my balance
Yeah.
sheet, that's what it is.
But if you didn't put it in as a fixed asset, just put it in as expense.
Yeah.
Then for that year, it's gonna be way skewed. So
I get all
every
annoyed
time
when
you
I see
pull
the
numbers,
depreciation.
like you
So
go
this
to
is
your
good.
grants or anything
Yeah.
like that, it's gonna.
did everybody hear that? So that's the mistake, right? If you buy something and you just expense it to equipment expense, and you're getting that hit on that expense for that year, that's gonna skew your P&L. So that's why we do this instead. That's why it becomes a balance sheet entry.
Change that if you just that year's $100 for that expense. Show that. show that, okay, you set aside out of these mill levy dollars for this year, $10,000 expense.
See, my initial knee jerk would be, you would have to enter it as an expense so that it balances showing that you spent that year's mill levy dollars that year.
Expense, report it. It's a fixed asset.
Well, and that's, you have to
Then
do
you
one or
just
the other.
turn it into a
Either
fixed
do
asset the
fixed
next
asset.
year.
Or-
That's what I'm trying to, because if you're specifically set $10,000 out of your budget from that mill levy dollars, you're spending that 10,000 that year.
How do you record your mill levy dollars? Is
Can
that-
everybody hear these questions in
that
this discussion? Okay,
class?
okay.
Do you use the class system for your mill levy dollars? Like she taught us about the class system in the first class. So like I have one that's mill levy dollars, and so that tracks that. Or, you know, you could have a sub income account that's your mill levy dollars, so that there's still some way to track. So like then when you spend that $10,000 buying a pickup or whatever, as long as you chose the expense account, that it's your mill levy dollars, then that would work out in the reports.
Right, and so then, you know, that's when you kind of get into that weird accounting thing. And maybe as districts, because you're not companies, I don't know if that IRS law, does that apply to you?
See, I just have my mill levy, it's set up as an income account. So I have a taxes account and then I have a mill levy. So as long as you select that one,
It's an expense to that, but it's not an income, it's an expense.
right? But so when you enter that expense, as long as it's going against the same COA. that's gonna-
Just right off the mill levy dollars. It's mill levy dollars.
Oh, you don't have any other company? that comes in?
They're separate agreements and stuff.
Okay.
You know, I think that that's a question that, you know, we need to write down and follow up on that in terms of, you know, if you have to show through reporting at the grant level that this money that they gave you to buy a piece of equipment was actually spent in that year, you know, that has to be expense then for that to show. Or it's education, right? That, you know, you can show that the check, right? So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually purchasing the asset, all right? So I'm showing the check, and it's the expense account is going to be that fixed asset cost account. That is what is the offset, right? That's what is going to increment the cost of that account. And so you could show that on a report as a balance sheet entry, right? That's not going to be on a P&L. So that could be education, because the correct way to do is to handle assets is to depreciate that over time. Anybody have a discussion item about that? Like some of you over here? Yeah.
Well, I think when we originally purchased, we have a work vehicle, and when it was originally purchased, there is a fixed asset account for it, then we traded it in.
Mhm.
And bought a different vehicle, and now it's showing the negative, the amount that we traded it in for. At 20,000, now it's showing a negative
Mhm.
20,000.
Okay.
Yeah, it's showing a loss. and I'm not sure how to-
Okay, so I'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay, what you need to do is when you're either trading it in or selling it, and the value of the trade-in, let's say, is less than the asset value that's on your books, then that goes into the difference, goes into a fixed asset gain or loss account, so that the asset value is zero. So you're not carrying a negative asset.
So,
It's you actually lost money on the trade-in because it was less than the booked value.
so it's showing the loss as the exact amount that we received for trade-in, so is that telling me there just wasn't a value assigned to it?
Let me show you how to put that transaction in
Okay,
correctly. So we can, on this transaction, we can assign a class to it so that we can report against it. I think it becomes an education issue with the grantor. So I feel like what the outstanding question is for districts, right? What is your best practice on how you want to handle this, right? In terms of the depreciation stream. Does that make sense? Somebody taking notes? Mhm.
So if something has been entered as an expense because we needed it to wash out that year for levy funds or a grant or whatever, is there a way to still utilize QuickBooks to track it as an asset to see what its worth would be, like if we go to trade it in or whatever?
You could
the
use
case
that
may be?
item list as a non-posting transaction. If you wanted to, you could enter the asset like in the next year, probably, and put an opening balance in there. But see, you're gonna have that offsetting.
Well, and that's.
Which
what-
is
what-
opening
is there-
balance
Is there
equity.
some way to not have, like, be able to track it, but not have QuickBooks reading it as essentially double because.
Yes, that's what it
Okay.
feels like, a double entry, right? Because you've expensed it and then you've entered it as a fixed asset. So that just doesn't make sense from an accounting perspective. To me, it feels like a reporting issue is what it feels like to me on the back end. So does this transaction make sense? I was just kind of getting into it because it felt like we were continuing on the topic. So now if I'm just outright buying this particular vehicle, I can just put it in the register, write a check, whatever, however I, put it in as a credit card transaction, whatever I'm using. And I'm using the account as the offset as that asset account, which is the cost. Right? So that's what's going to increment that on my chart of accounts.
If you click the three dots where it says more over on the right. Yep. You can go down and hit high floating meeting control, down one more. There you go.
Thank you. So do you ever get a loan instead? Do you get a loan at all to purchase equipment? No, it's,
Yeah.
okay, but maybe for. So what I'm just gonna do is I'm just gonna go back and I'm just gonna delete this, right? So this is when you buy it and you have the cash, right? You just put that transaction in. So let's say you go to get a loan, right? So this is at the bottom of page 3 in your handout. So this is just, taking this a different direction. So I'm going to create a long-term liability. That means I'm going to pay it off in longer than a year, right? That's where that wording goes. So loan tends to be less than a year. Long-term liability is that account that you might want to set up if it's longer than a year, right? That would be the right type to choose. So did I do that? Did I put my number? There we go. And so now what we do is we use that as the offset. So I am just going to go into recording the deposit. You know, we go to the loan or we go to whatever, our credit union, our bank, we get the loan. I'm just saying I went to my credit union. And how we increment that loan value is that long-term liability then, right? This is where I got the money from the credit union. So that becomes the long-term liability. You know, class it, and let's say then that amount is $10,000. Save and close. And so I'm going to go to my chart of accounts. And so we can see that we've incremented the loan account for that amount, right? And so then we go to buy it, right? Now we have this money in our bank. And so now, again, however you choose to use this, I'm just going to use write checks. So this is where we would then increment the asset value. Oh, made a lot of money in a short time on that one. And so it's just remembering the last transaction on that name. So $10,000. So I'm going to have like an asset and liability entry if I was doing a balance sheet by class. Are we good with that? And so I'm just going to go to my chart of accounts. And so now I can see again my cost, and I can see it subtotaling up into that parent account. You know, and it may be that I want to reorder these, right? You know, that you can just move accounts by dragging them on your chart of accounts. You could even take your petty cash that's a sub and move it out if you chose in that way. And so we're just moving forward onto page 4. This is where I have that note about if you're adding old assets that have already been paid off, how the offset to that is going to be your opening balance equity account. And so for your depreciation entry, I'm just going to double click to open this up. So this is when you get that figure, whether it's from an accountant, your supervisor, you figure it out on your own online, right? And you do some kind of computation. So this is, I'm just going to put in $1,500. It's a decrease. And this is when we get that now onto our income and expense, our P&L, right? That goes against that depreciation expense account. And then I'm just going to take a look at my chart of accounts, right? So you can kind of see what the value is left in terms of the life of that asset. Riveting, isn't it? Love this topic. Okay. So when you're selling or trading in, right, and you need to kind of remove that entry from your chart of accounts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that account, and I'm just going to add it as an income account. And I'm just going to call this fixed asset gain or loss. Oh. I'm sorry?
How are you thinking? How you
You know, I'm following Heidi's scheme that she had on her chart of accounts. So I'm just trying to put it in, you know, logically where it might fit.
Which is,
And I think.
it's not
talking
mine.
about it in the training, it's actually like it's the PERS code for districts to use just to start.
Kind of like, I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
It should be in there.
I think it's in some of the training stuff.
Yeah, you just select numbers underneath that fit within that. The. You select numbers within that.
You know, I think there was some discussion about that in the first class that we went through. Like some people use it and some people don't. And
There are benefits to using it.
Mhm.
When you're doing your Department of Administration report, you can just, if you're using the bars chart accounts, you can just print off a couple of reports, put the bottom line on the form, sign it, send it in, versus filling out all their forms. So that's why I did it. Because the Department of Administration report now takes 10 minutes instead of however many days.
so I'm just going to page 5. So when you sell an asset, what you want to do is calculate or get the depreciation for that portion of the year so that you expense that in the appropriate year. So there's usually a depreciation entry that needs to be made. And so I'm just gonna go into my depreciation register. And of course, all these dates are kind of goofy, right? Because I'm doing everything today. So I'm just gonna say for a portion of the year, the depreciation amount was $500. And I'm just gonna record that so that my asset value is going to be reflected correctly for me. So that is now what my asset value is for this particular piece of equipment. And so we're on page 5. So we actually sold this vehicle. And the example there I have is this journal entry that we're going to make. And so we're going to make some money off of it, which is kind of fun. But what I have to do is I'm just going to go into my journal entry form. So the account that I am going to debit is I am going to debit my original cost account, or excuse me, my bank account is my first entry. And I get my payment there for $9,000. And then my cost, the leftover value is $8,000, right? That's how I get that parent asset to 0 on my balance sheet. And so I have this $1,000 difference, which is what I have to deal with. And that's what I have to put into that income account that I set up, which was that fixed asset gain or loss. And so that's how I get that transaction to balance. Make sense? So when I look here, what I see still in my sub-account structure is the value of the asset that was depreciated, which is correct, because theoretically, you're going to have that expense on prior year P&Ls. And we want to maintain those entries that were obviously made in those prior years. And we can see now the value of that asset is down to 0. So in terms of reporting, I'm just going to go to a profit and loss standard report. And so what I see on my P&L is I see that income, right, that I got from the sale of that asset. And I can see those depreciation expenses hitting that I entered. You know, it's just because I'm doing it all today that we see it on the same P&L. I'm sorry, this is so boring. I know, I hate the afternoon time slot. And of course, if I did a balance sheet, you know, this is sort of the thing because of the fact that sub-accounts still have entries. You know that you can always, if you wanted to, sort of collapse that kind of entry. So, you know, I would say that's a little bit of a downside, right? It's gonna be there because if you've depreciated that way, you can't get it off. So questions at all about that? Oh, woo, yeah, let's give a hand to depreciation. Woo! You know, the other thing that I didn't say, and I want you to know that I will not be offended. So if you at any time need to stand up, leave, go to the restroom, stretch, the topic isn't of interest and you need to get some work done, like, you know, this time is yours. So I'm way okay with that. Okay, so we are up to, it looks like my page number got flipped off, page 6. Maybe you can see it in your handout. And up at the top, so one of the topics that you requested was more on reporting in QuickBooks, okay? And so this would be where, since we had a little issue getting a printed copy of this for you, if you can bring it up, the actual handout, or if you happen to have it, you could do that. And we're starting on page 9, and I'll just walk you through this if you don't have access to either one. And I think that this could be another opportunity for a best practices discussion. So when I train nonprofits on how to set up grants, this is how I train them how to do it. Okay, like this is what's out there in the industry on the how-to. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up my customer list. And do you see this example up at the top? And we talked about this in the first class, right? Setting up a grantor as a customer and then setting up grants underneath the customer as jobs. Are you doing that? I'm in the first handout, and my handout that I have says page 9, and up at the top is a heading, important terminology for QuickBooks and associated lists. You know, if you're looking at it digitally, it may be slightly different than that. Okay. Right, so I did headers and footers in Word, right? Different section breaks, which cause that problem. So page 12, if you're looking at a PDF, thank you very much. So are you setting up grantors as job or as customers, and then the grants that you get from that grantor as jobs within that customer? Are you doing that?
I kept my class system and I didn't go into the jobs. I remember thinking, cool, I did.
So the reason that that is the recommendation for lots of nonprofits, and maybe that is not necessary for you, is so that if you have a grant that you get and the money goes to different classes, you can still do, for example, a budget by that customer job, right? Because your budgets, if you're using QuickBooks for that, that's going to be a topic, another riveting topic that we'll get into later today. You can do budgets at your district level, you can do budgets at job levels, and you can do budgets at class levels. So it's another way that you can sort of slice the information if you have grants that you get that are applied to different classes. Like maybe a grant that some of the money goes to admin and unrestricted, but some of the other grant money goes to a specific program. So classes tend to be program level names. And the program level names, you know, that I don't know if I created them or if you created them, Heidi. Programs. Did you create these or did I?
Some of them are mine. And then
I think some of them are mine.
But can't you do the same thing with classes by doing subclasses? I mean, like the way I've got my class structure set up, it's, I have a grants class with state and federal broken out separately, and then I have underneath those the grant name, and then underneath that any specific tasks that have to be broken out by that grant.
You know, you could do that. It's just that if you have other grants that go to the same program in the same year, then it's harder for you to do a program level budget or a program level P&Ls by class, right? Because they're divided.
So
They're divided up if you do it that way.
Has anyone had a grant that they spent on different programs?
or
I
multiple
just did
grants on
One
program.
grant for one program.
That's typically what I do is one
Yes.
grant on one program.
Well, I'm now thinking I'm gonna host the AmeriCorps soil position. And part of that funding's being split, right? Part of it's coming from, I'm looking, sorry, I'm looking at that. Part of it's coming from DNRC and part of it's coming from somewhere else. Yeah, MAC, right? So my brain's really cycling here because I just got approved for the grant, I think last week. I'm gonna host it. But so then that would be a way, because it's gonna go into this program, but there's two different funding sources coming into it. So that would be a customer would be the whole thing, and then the two different jobs would be the two different funding sources? Is that what I'm tracking?
What we usually do is each grantor is a customer name, because you may have to prepare a budget just for the funds from that grant for that grantor. If you're using budgeting in QuickBooks.
Right.
So it's the customer name, like see how I have DNRC.
Mhm.
So you're going to get multiple grants from that name over time. And if you needed to do reporting for that grantor, you know, then it's
So then
divided
like
out.
the 2020 WS grant, that's not listed as a job, that's a sub-customer? Is that what you did?
That is, yes, that is a job
It is.
underneath a
Okay.
customer.
Okay.
So
Those are
that's-
jobs underneath customers.
So that's how you would recommend if you had DNRC grants, that you would break each grant out under DNRC as a customer job.
And then when you're entering transactions, you have to use that name, right? In order to get your reporting to flow. So they all forms and QuickBooks have customer job names.
In the long run, if you're doing like what Chris was saying where she has a class as state grants, and then each grant that she's ever gotten is as a class. This would reduce the number of columns for your report by class. Is that how? You can still get a report for that grant using a by customer quick report, or, I mean, so is it a way to reduce those class items?
What I see a lot with nonprofits, and I'll just pick on Mission West, their class list is a mess. Because over time, and I guess it just depends on how many grants you get, you know, and how detailed you have to be. But they were getting to the point where you couldn't even hardly see the whole class name because they had so many subs underneath.
Right.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, you just into that.
So can
You
you
want like
make, can you
an
make classes inactive like you can?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just something for you to think about and maybe try, right? If, you know, especially if you're getting like a new grant,
Right.
you know, maybe try it this way, run the report, see if you like what you're getting. See, it gives you, doing it this way, it gives you a different layer. Of course, on your profit and loss by class report, you can always filter, right? I mean, so that you're just diving down to what you want to see. It is a different way of thinking about it.
I think a majority of us started, because we've done it years ago, yeah, to change it just done by class, subclass. And doing it that. But if this would change the columns, because I find the same thing, I mean, almost every year you're getting new grants, hopefully you're getting new funding from the same vendor, that you just are in a different number, different form. So just out of curiosity, Liz, you go into the customer DNRC and you do a quick report, will it show all of the subclass of all of our DNRC grants to where it shows what was in income and expense out of there? So it shows all the transactions of those two grants that are under DNRC. So that would be a heck of a lot easier than in that class situation, and you won't have an Excel spreadsheet that's 137 columns long.
Right, when you go to do a new application, they want to
Yeah.
know which grants are that are active. you
Yeah,
just
this,
pick what it
I've
is.
never, I've worked with QuickBooks for years, I've never even thought about doing this.
So this is just a list of transactions.
Right,
This isn't a P&L.
right.
But it's a list of transactions.
And that's sometimes what our board wants to see, what did we spend and where, it's not necessarily a profit
Okay.
and loss for them. And if they have income that we kind of in for the grant, that's like a reimbursement, will that show up on a quick report, because you're using the same name?
It depends on how you put it in.
So if you use it as another name rather than a vendor, will it show up, or is it not?
Well, if you're getting income coming in, don't you use a sales receipt form from that name and from that? And I'm going to show the difference between doing a deposit versus doing a sales receipt form when we get into reporting. Because there's another riveting topic about source and target data in reporting. Doesn't that just give you goosebumps? I know. Do you see how?
See, I'm sorry, you're just blowing our mind.
Oh, good.
We're waking up, I don't know. But we're just saying, you know, like when I get my money and it's automatically deposited into our account from DNRC, honestly, I just do a deposit and I pass it to the grant I go to. Now you're squinting, but you have to remember, I've only been here 22 years.
Well, that's.
Let's do it as you received income, and
Yeah,
you just have to, when you did your vendor invoice, you'd almost have to make an invoice or receipt of some sort in QuickBooks too. See, that makes me crazy.
But you can use the receipt in QuickBooks as your acknowledgement of the receipt of funds.
You don't have to do an invoice on a QuickBooks when you bill the NRC.
Well, if you request the funding from them, or if it's just an automatic deposit,
And you
they,
do it to
No, you have to
invoices.
request.
So if.
oh,
there's-
okay.
And
Then-
they have what they call a vendor invoice.
You're required to use their
Yeah.
form, so you're basically doing two invoices.
Okay.
That would make me crazy.
See, and I don't,
I don't use any. of
like
the
when I
invoicing.
like I just did DNRC for my pollinator.
I don't do.
I
any
gave
invoicing.
them the invoice. It's not in my QuickBooks yet. When that money actually comes in, I will do a receipt. And then I'll do it against the class that I had set up for that
I
grant.
tried to do that and I kept missing them, so I just finally said no more invoicing through QuickBooks for me. Otherwise,
So-
they screw things up.
You don't invoice at all.
You're pulling it.
Not for me.
You know, I'll blow your mind even more, I think, when we actually get into this reporting of source and target data. Because it matters a lot how you get the transactions in terms of what you get on your reports. Because that can be really confusing. It's like, why can't I see this in a class report? Why does this deposit that I got from DNRC, why can't I go to the customer list and see that transaction listed there? Why doesn't it show on a quick
Well,
report?
and that's the question I was asking is that, and you're saying that they're gonna go into entering sales,
Yes,
the receipt type of thing, when we get those monies.
I'll show you the difference with Sally Smith. I have an
Oh, you're
example.
awesome. Let's see how Sally does.
Yeah. Sally does it right and Sally does it wrong. So we can learn from Sally. So I just want to talk about how you can slice the information through reporting. I mean, that's why we're doing this in QuickBooks, right? Is so that we can report against this for your supervisors board, your grantors, whoever you need to report to. And so I just on this next page, which I think is no, it's still maybe 12 for you. I talk about the customer type field. Are you using that? How do you use the customer type field? Did you say very well? And it's just based on really what you need, right? You may not need to use this. So some nonprofits have members, right, who donate money. And so if I associate that name, right, to a customer type by member, then I can do, and I use the sales receipt form, right, to get their money in. Then I can do a sales by customer type report so that I can see how much income over what period of time came from members versus, you know, grantors versus whatever. So if you have different designations like that, that would be what I would think you would use your customer type field for. But I'm not sure if you have that or not. It's just another assignment that allows you to slice the reporting data a different way. Does this generate any?
Oh, it generates.
So I'll ask the question and I'll tell you how I do it and then if there is a perk to doing it this way. So customers that we have, for example, we'll have a producer and he buys things from us, but that same producer will sometimes come in and just make a cash donation. But so instead of setting up, because if you set them up as a donor here, then you'd also have to set them up as someone else and then they'd be in there twice. Versus what I do is I just put in my item list as an other charge, I have donation. So that I'm not getting double of that producer in my system. Is that?
You could do it at the item level and you could do a sales by item report as a donor.
Because that's how I do it, because usually my donations are coming from community members that at one time or another, I'm giving them a receipt or a bill for something else, so.
Right. So sometimes if you're giving them a bill, right, if they're a vendor, we have to have two names. Is that what you mean by
No,
bill?
no, I'm sorry, an
Oh.
invoice, so like the.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Right.
So, yeah, so that's how I do it.
Yeah.
Is I break it down on my item list and I just have an other charge of donation So I can cut it that way.
You could
but I
even
don't
have a service charge as a service type of item as donation, right? It just depends on how you want your item reports broken out.
Oh.
Okay, so I assume that that's enough on that topic. You know, one thing that I have on the next page in your handout, it's a screenshot of the multiple customer window. And I don't know if that is relevant to you at all, but it's a way to quickly catch up on different lists. So let's say you decided that you wanted to use customer type and nobody had, you know, you hadn't put that in on your customers yet. You don't have to go into each individual record to add that entry, right? Or if you're behind on getting email addresses in or phone numbers, if you've ever felt that pain of feeling like you have to open up individual things in order to do that catch up. And so what I'm initiating here is I'm just in my customer center. I'm up here at the new customer job button, and it's adding multiple customers and jobs. And it's very much like an Excel spreadsheet. Have you used this before? Does the pain that I've described resonate with you? Okay, all right, good. Okay, so do you see that at the top of this window, you see we have a 1, 2, 3, so there's steps that you can follow when you open this up. The lists that are available to you to do multiple entries are these. The second step is to customize columns to display. And so the customize column button is over here on the right. So I could click that. And the columns currently chosen are in the right column. And let's say inactive, I don't care about. But you know, that's a way that you can quickly inactivate people from your list. You know how you feel like you're not going to do that individually because it takes too long. But if you wanted to do it quickly, that is an option here in this window. Let's say, you know, I have phone, email, customer type, I don't know, job type, let's say. I want to quickly add entries in that field. And then when I click OK, you can see how I've customized the columns for the entries. So now that I have people in here, if I wanted to, you know, add phone numbers, add an email, right? So I could quickly catch up on that quick add stuff that I wanted to do if I found the need. Questions about that? And then when I save changes, I only did one customer, but if I had done a bunch, right, I would get a message that a lot of them had been updated.
We're just in the customer.
Yeah, where that came from was my customer center. Up at the top, the new customer job button, that's where I can find that multiple entries.
Screen, like to adjust your menu instead of doing it one by one. All your items.
We do that same thing with, we have, inventory. Check the prices of your trees.
Just non-inventory parts, but I may have inventory turned off here.
Yeah, because I'm almost positive.
You
that I
can do that. I've done it with clients before with inventory, so I just must have it turned off in this company file. And the cool thing about this is, do you see paste from Excel? And so the client that I had like their inventory was a mess, right? And you do have inventory items, right? I figured I had done that before. And so what we did was we exported a report from QuickBooks into Excel so that we could use the fill handle, right, to fix some things a little bit faster. And then we pasted it back in. So you can do a combination of both. So sometimes it's faster to get that into Excel. Are we good?
All the days I've spent changing those things while you're cutting.
Okay. What I have on this next page, or I guess it's on the same page as that multiple customer screen, is I thought I'd just run a few different reports, and maybe I don't need to do that before we get into that source and target discussion on reports. So I was just, and I kind of didn't make a note here. What I did was I did sales by customer summary report, and I filtered to a type. So I don't, like, are you interested in this or not? It doesn't seem like type really did much for you. Sales by customer summary. And I could do all dates so that we see that there's really more out there. Did you really have an anonymous donor for $25,000? I know, I put that transaction in. I could see your face. So now I'm seeing all, right, all transactions. And the idea would be that you could filter by that customer type field so that you could just see what the income was generated from that customer type, is what that was all about. And then if I go to reports, and if I do a profit and loss by job report, so I'm going to see all transactions, right, for all of my customer jobs for whatever reporting period that it might be. And if I wanted to just drill down, right, I could, of course, filter to a name. And I don't want all customers or jobs. I just may want that parent company, right? So that for the period that I'm in, and I don't know if more will come up yet. If I did all, then I can see those transactions that were associated with the name, right? And I could see those over time totaling up to that parent level, right? The actual customer. So we're going to go, class tracking was just a little bit on the next page, and I think you all are using it. We've talked enough about it. Do you have volunteers? No? Sometimes? So what I see from most of the nonprofits that I work with, they put their volunteers on an other name list to keep them separate from customers. Is that what you all do?
So like, could we use that for our supervisors when we reimburse them their mileage?
I've never used that. I've never used that.
So I'm just thinking that that would be nice to have them separated, like from when they buy trees from us versus when, you know, we're reimbursing them mileage. Because, I mean, they're our board, they're volunteer. The only time they ever get money is when they're giving mileage reimbursement.
You can't have two of the same names, even if they're on separate lists.
Right.
You put, yeah, you put a C or you put a, you know, an M or an S or whatever, however you want to identify that.
Just wondering if that would make it easier.
The other names list, I'm just going to see if I can. So if you tracked volunteer time in QuickBooks, and I think we talked about this in the last class a little bit, using the other names list, and you can actually, even if you're not doing payroll, you can use a time card to enter it in and associate those volunteer hours to a program. You know, so if you wanted to do that, you could. So that's just a volunteer then, and that was the time that was put in against different jobs, you know, so you can just slice it differently if you wanted to see it that way.
And that stuff shows up on your P&L.
No,
Sometimes it will say, you know, we have this many volunteer hours going into this project.
Yeah. That's why.
Because data equals dollars. You can say,
I know that the RLE CDC does that, right? They track volunteer hours by program so that they can use that for their next grant cycle. But maybe their stuff is different than yours. The other names list is the only list in QuickBooks that allows you to take that name and convert it to either a customer or vendor, right? Once you have a name on a list and transactions associated to it, you can't change or move that name around. Okay, so now in this handout, this is still the first handout. So my page number is 24, but the heading at the top of the page is reporting : background. So
Page 27.
page 27. So the idea with this topic, and this is a review from the last time, and because you asked for it again, that's why I'm doing it again. But if you don't want me to do it, I don't have to. But this was the information that I was trying to pass along to you, was this idea that QuickBooks reporting can be confusing because it divides information onto forms into source versus target data. And it can be confusing for us when we generate reports because we think we should be able to see data from a transaction on a report, and we don't because of this differentiation that QuickBooks makes with what is source information on a transaction versus target information. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring up a transaction. So if you wanted to use customer jobs, right, and see the expense side of that, you would have to associate the donor name, right, the grant name in addition to the class on that transaction. And so this is a bill that I entered against a name and a class. And the keyboard shortcut here to see what source and target data is, what QuickBooks considers that on a form, is Control Y. I know what Y. And so the first line of this report shows you what data is source data, which appears on summary level reports. And the second line shows you what is target data. So do you see the name on the bill is the vendor that I paid, DoubleTree. That's source data. The target data is the job and the sub-job as well as the class. So if you have you had that problem before? It's like, why doesn't class show up on this report? Do you ever bump into that? Lots of people do, but I don't want to bore you. So my first example that I wanted to show you was if I, and I'm not sure if you do this or not, but let's say you wanted to do an unpaid bills detail report for the board, like what bills are outstanding. I don't know if you ever do that or not. I guess this is the only outstanding bill. But do you see how it is giving you just source level data, right? I'm seeing just DoubleTree is the name on that bill. And I'm seeing, I don't see the class. And so if I customize this report, because I want to see the class column, it will put the column there, but it won't show me class on this report. And I don't know if you care, but I mean, that's a demonstration, right, of some confusion that people get. And we don't get to see that on this report because it's a summary level report that will only show me source information. Do you think you're gonna? And so I'm just going to the next, let's see. Oh, okay. Okay, so a better report that is going to show you more detail to get you sort of beyond that problem. I'm going to reports and I'm going to accountant and taxes. And I'm going to go to a transaction detail by account report. And so this is defaulting to a month to date report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to customize this in a couple ways. So you can see how this detail report is showing you classes, right? I mean, it's showing you like everything. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but on that report, is there a way to pull that report without having every check you've written pulled at the top of it? Do you know what I'm saying? Because that would be I'm always looking for is that
So the filter, there is no filter by account applied. And so if you go to account, it's all accounts. And you have lots of choices of what accounts you want to see on this report. So if you wanted to see multiple accounts, you could pick and choose which accounts you wanted to see.
It's not include like the checking. It's pulling both sides of each transaction.
It is.
Yeah, so you can filter that out.
Right. So you could do like all income and expense accounts if that's what you wanted to see and you didn't want to see balance sheet level.
And that's within the filter.
That's within a filter at the account level.
Okay.
Sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to customize this report and I'm going to filter it because what I'm trying to give or get for the board is an unpaid bills listing, what bills are currently outstanding. And so I'm going to filter it to paid status. So what is opened? And I can click OK. And then I'm going to customize the report again. And I'm going to filter it by transaction type. And all I want to see are bills.
Don't you have to enter those bills under the enter bills?
You would. You
You
would.
don't- I don't recall this.
I don't use that feature.
I only put ones that I like my tree or something.
So if you know, and this could be a best practices conversation here. If you, do you give balance sheets to your board?
They all.
So if you give balance sheets to your board, you should enter them in as bills, right? So that accounts payable is going to be accurate. If you don't, and you just keep them in a folder until you pay them, I mean, that's okay. I mean, that it's just what you need and what you need to report on. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to go to another example that I put together here on this idea of source and target information. Oops. Sorry, I just have to. So this is the deposit form. Do you see how I received from Sally Smith? I just sold her some product for $500 on the deposit form. And you see how her name is there. And if I use that shortcut of Control Y, you can see that her name is target information, right? That name is target information. If I find this transaction for Sally, I'm just gonna, so this is actually a zero transaction, but I used the sales receipt form that I've customized to have the word donation on it. And if I do a Control Y, you can see her name is source information, right? It's source and it's target, because the name on that sales receipt form is going to be picked up as source, whereas on that deposit form, it isn't. And so this is where it sort of matters which forms you use, deposit versus an actual sales receipt form. And so this can be confusing for people, because if I go to my customer center, and if I look at the transactions, all transactions for Sally Smith, do you see how I don't see that $500 transaction? Because it was how I entered it. And it's because of how QuickBooks handles source and target data. But maybe you don't care. I don't know. You know.
No, I think out of all the years, that's the one thing I think I just learned from the rules that I think we can definition to switch to just entering.
Yes.
See where it's coming from.
Right. And if you use your customer center at all and your customer list, then it'll make more sense, because you'll get to see those transactions, even if it's an in-kind donation from that person. So if I went back to that report under accountant and taxes, transaction by detail by account, I can customize that report and I can filter it. And so because this report pulls both source and target information, then I start getting to see those transactions grouped together. So this is a good report to go to, I guess, if you're confused about what you're seeing and using that filtering capability. I can even customize a report and filter it by an amount. So if I didn't want to see those 0 transaction kinds of report, I could say, all transactions I want to see that are just, greater than 1, if you want to get rid of some of that other in-kind donation stuff. You can even customize a report and you can add a column for source name. So if you're sort of continually kind of confused, you can see that one transaction, because we use the deposit form, her name isn't associated as a source name. So sometimes, that's what I do when I'm confused about what I'm seeing on a report. Clear as mud?
Just a question, when you do a deposit detail, how you do check details, deposit details, is that why the column is blank then? Because the deposit detail is not, it's the sourcing?
It is not a source. And a lot of
When
people.
you do the sales receipt, if you go to a deposit detail on that, it'll show Sally's name in the column, what it is.
But you want to get all of her transactions together under her name also.
Right.
I'm assuming.
Right, I'm just saying, because
Yeah.
like for monthly deposit
Sure.
detail, then it shows up as that
Sure,
column.
right.
That makes sense now, I understand.
Okay, good. Any questions about that? So just turning to a page, and there is, it's after some of these reports that I have produced. I gave you screenshots of them. And oh, by the way, there was just a reminder about cash versus accrual, right? When you're doing reports and the differences of what that might show you. Did you all decide what you should be as a best practice, cash versus accrual?
I've always been told cash.
Cash. Okay. So remember,
The cash basis. We don't have accounts receivable and things like that on billing, and that's where the accrual affects what liabilities you owe to what the sales are that you know equipment rental. It's just on basis, it's giving you what you should be at, but if you never receive those sales, that's where the cash basis is. This is exactly what we have and what we paid. The accrual for payroll is a big deal if you want to keep track of. So your district knows that you only got 10,000 account, but you got payroll liabilities of 5,000. They need to know. So it just depends on your board. My board likes the cash. There's no real right reason.
I just do accrual because I just bill out my grants quarterly. And so
Yeah,
it looks
it's
like
all-
we have them, so it doesn't look like that's money that's spent.
Chris, do you use cash or cash?
I was always told to use cash.
so this is just the difference, right? So you can see on an accrual-based report, it shows that I owe that bill. Like I entered it, not all of you are entering bills, but I haven't paid it yet. The cash hasn't gone out. And so if I did a cash basis report, that doesn't show. So cash is when, like you could have an invoice, like if you're using an invoice form to request money, but you haven't received it yet. On a P&L, if you did a cash basis, that won't show because you haven't gotten the cash for that invoice yet.
And that's why I use.
But
accrual.
accrual.
I use accrual all the time, even though my company, based on IRS designation, is cash. Because accrual just makes more sense to me. At the end of the year, I give my accountant cash basis because I don't want to pay taxes on income that I haven't received.
And that might be why I've always done cash, because I started out as a tax person. So that.
Well, that would be why I do it, because the tax person is who taught me.
Yeah. That's just.
It's an IRS designation based on your business type. But QuickBooks, it's just a flip of a switch so that you could see it either way, whatever the need is. So, you know, we're just about on time here with what I thought we would have with our agenda. And I had about 15 minutes. Actually, we have about 10 minutes before a quick break at 2:30 to pose questions about what we've talked about so far, or to pose off-topic questions that you might have that you want to bring up about your own company file. Do you want to bring up the question you asked me that I couldn't answer?
Has anybody changed their? Trying to separate. You wanna use your license.
The question was, has anybody had to change their licensed QuickBooks user ID and password because of a turnover?
About that during lunch. For the EO, I just purchased. Subscription. So you have to pay that every year instead of having it stop. So, because we're getting a computer, checking directly, having to switch the license. So I can use it. But right now, I have the EO and Stillwater on this computer. So I'll be switching the EO off, but Stillwater on here. Desktop. This is a 2008. Yeah.
They figured us out when we didn't renew it 5 years, 6 years, or 6 years.
I don't have a payroll subscription. So
But you're saying you're trying to divide out what MACD purchased of it.
she's trying to get well.
Oh.
So they should be able to do it by license.
So it sounds like the two of you can have a conversation about that. It sounds like it's kind of limited to that group. Are there other questions that you all want to pose to the group about best practices or confusions?
I have a comment about the using your USDA email address as registration for QuickBooks. There have been some problems with transitions between administrators. Of course, if your USDA password or email address is used in your Intuit account, then there will be no way for you to get into that account, the new person to get into that account, because that email goes away.
Can't know. Well, you can't validate. They try to do
Right.
any kind of changes.
Right.
And so that's where I've really gotten after all the years here. I don't recommend districts using the NRCS's server USDA. I recommend getting your own email, whether it's through the MACD's
Or generic Gmail or something.
Gmail, whatever works best, so that you have easier access for your emails and just have it be a generic Judith Basin CD, you know, and then it doesn't matter who gets that email, it'll always be Judith Basin CD, just change the password.
Right. As long as the login and password are written down before the person leaves the job.
Yeah.
Then it's not a big deal, but we've run into that a couple of times in the last couple of years where there's no access to the QuickBooks account.
Yeah, and that's what I found out when I didn't even think about it and stuff. Where it was around for registration, and wanted to validate, well, I couldn't get into the office, we
Right.
were in shutdown.
Right.
So then that's what it's like.
I have an email address, I'm not on the server, but I have an email address that doesn't have my name on it, it's got the district's name on it. I try to use that for submittable, I use it for QuickBooks, I use it for anything that's specifically for the conservation district. If I were to get hit by a bus tomorrow and nobody could get into my LCCD or the other email address, then they could get into that.
So maybe that's a to-do for everybody, right?
That's
To-
that's a recommendation is to do that. And make sure that somebody on your board knows where your password and login are for that account.
Any other questions or best practices discussions since you're all here in the room?
So, yeah, talking about deposits, so if I create an invoice for some sales, some map books and, you know, whatever, trees or whatever. So I create an invoice and I receive the payment from the customers. It's a question, but how do you group those like 5 transactions together to match the bank deposit? Does it group it automatically?
So I guess there are two answers to that
Okay.
question, as always. I don't even know if I have any open invoices or not, but when I go to record deposits, if I've received payments, right? If you do an
Right.
invoice, you receive payments. And then when you go to this next step, record deposits. So by default, all
It'll group them all
received
together.
payments goes into undeposited funds, which is a holding account, so that you can then decide either by payment method or by the list there, you choose which ones to group together so it matches your bank deposit. And so you can see that this company file has $400 sitting there in undeposited funds. And if I went to my chart of accounts, I would see that, right? That is a balance sheet type of an account. So it's a pass-through account. You can change that under preferences. You can change that. So if you see on forms, deposit to a certain account, because some people want to skip that step, going through undeposited funds because they just don't have that many to group together. So it is a setting under preferences. So you may want to check that, because if
Yeah,
you're.
I don't know what setting it has there. but
Right.
yeah.
Something that was talked about at the first QuickBooks training that might be good for new people is if you have a system that's been going on for years and years and it's maybe not working, or maybe you want to try this new system at the beginning of your new fiscal year, it's a great time to start, and you can just start over. And I thought that was really helpful for me, because I had taken so much time trying to like go back and make everything fit into this new system that I wanted.
Orange accounts.
Yeah, it was
So
so,
when you started over, what do you mean, you just started doing it differently, or did you create a whole new QuickBooks?
yeah, you create a new company.
And you can still import like your customer list.
Yeah, that's what I did.
So then you could rebuild your chart of accounts and your item list
Right.
and everything,
So
so
you could
what
do
makes
custom.
sense to you. But you could still export and then re-import your customer list. You don't have to start that.
So that's under the file
command, utilities.
Okay.
So you see where you can export lists to IIF files. That's an interchange. I don't know what it stands for, but it's an Intuit interchange format, I think is what that stands for. And when you click lists, you get to pick which list you would like to export. And they're exported with 0 balances.
So then you just import it right back.
And then if you open your new company file, I usually just drop these onto the desktop so that I know where they are and then I delete them. And then you open your new company file, you go to this utility and you import these lists with 0 balances. So you'll have to enter opening balances, right? You'll have to
Right,
have
yeah.
your,
Put it in fixed assets.
you will. And so you'll always have that old company file to refer to. Yeah. Anything else before we take a break so we can get up and move around a little bit? So I have 2:30. How much of a break do you need to revitalize? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? What do you want? Do you need to catch up with your stuff?
There is no catching up. There's just coming up for air now and there.
10 minutes?
That sounds great.
Okay, so 2:40, we'll come back and we'll continue on.
Can't forget it. Sensitive. Too sensitive. Sensitive digestion. Yeah. There's certain types of beer. I do, since I started and I see that is what their customers do. Because they're charging. And then they have bills. They have so we do monthly bills. And then that's yeah. And that was I like that one too. And that was the general journal report. And it was Jan. That's why I was like, what she said. Yeah. And then, yeah, I totally started. I should have been doing that where I was looking for where it just. And then I just. Right check. Yeah. Right check. That's how I used to the process as well. It's you know, I don't either. I just. Yeah, so it's nice. Yeah. Where we are, so the year. And I do financial statement. That's what it is. See, I didn't have to cost and budget because I talked to a variable out. Yeah. Well, most of the times I just on my board, but you board. My little checks in, and yeah, most of the time, check registers. Yeah. I do. What I do is, because one, I show for having this checks for our. But we have. We're down. Yeah. So you can come. No, I guess that. They won't see the whole check.
Yeah.
But it's almost. Everyone is different, but see, my treasurer's report, you don't ask for a registration now, but I'm saying it's getting balanced. And you get even that's why I like that. Financial statement is has yeah, the counties. Especially. So I want to know.
It says state accounting.
So that those costs are going to keep that.
And maybe.
I do have to. But that's actually.
And then it's.
But see, I had to build it. But here's our. And if I go to. And be able to pay. Yeah, because then it shows. Yeah. Well, it's when it's they used to have their classes one by 30. So like. No. No, but I mean, it's just the way that it looks, especially when they want to. Well, the budgeting. But we do our budget and we do the budget.
And we didn't have
Just a simple couple-page report on their accounts. But they do have, you know, we just do a lot of education, like some classes of that, just. And then we have the action one that just. That way, we do, you know, they want to know what the budget for those things. But then, you know, it used to be all of the.
And they use their.
Yeah, well, that's why this one is the first, this is the first year. Yeah, and she's confused us.
Yeah.
And then maybe the course I go.
Yeah. I went through. Well, because chart accounts is your general.
Yeah.
Projects. Projects.
Because I can hear that.
Oh, I get what we just went through. Well, you have 5%.
I feel like you're totally married. Dreams. Something lost.
We have right now, we have our basic accounts, and they're all checking savings.
Yeah, she sent her fabrics. I ordered fabric. And then I thought that she sent it. Yeah.
I know what you're saying, no, because that's what. I see what you're saying, like, that's fun. It's not. And that's what I get.
She was super nice.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah, it's just sad.
Yeah.
And they were.
Yeah, it was. But it didn't show up, so we're going to. So that's. So then I can transfer. Like today, I just. I see what you're saying now. Oh, so it's like, and it was, there's she paid termination, she loved me, there was the savings company, and then you had cascade. She's only very. Yeah, our auditors are. Yeah. She's my treasure. Yeah. She's learning, I taught her a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Elliot. So yeah, actually, our she started, she's all especially when I asked them last years, changes on. She was supportive. They want to simplify. It's just the time. So she started. July 1 was my sister company. And we simplified the bars for another. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, but I don't really want to. That's always been done since I was hired. I don't have a problem. Just because the reports they want. You don't have to. Done 5 years. I'm just trying to get it set up because a lot of these things, I was in line. I don't need 2 years. Emma will be gone, Emma will come back. And I wanted it simplified. Yeah, everything is all right there and it would be easy. So no, well, a lot of us administrators were not trained as accountants. Some of us are hired because we like them to have resources concerns in mind, more than accountants. I had taxes, I would say bookkeeper taxes a number of years.
Isn't it gorgeous?
My eyes were.
I know.
Got a little blinded.
You've been in this room a long time today, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was funny. Is it going okay?
Yeah. No, I think it's just hard to think about it. And exactly how it fits in your situation.
Yeah.
And knowing when you should like raise your hand and be like, is this a group question or is this like a tangent? It's just, I have this one situation.
Right.
And whatever. But it is nice. It's just nice to hear how it's supported.
That's what I thought, you know, if only this provides a platform for people to talk about how they learn.
Yep, and everybody was much more excited about it. And so that's, yeah. So I wish the folks around could hear. You know, everyone knows where I don't attend many.
Most people come, you know, when I have the option, Zoom or in person, I just kind of follow some of the stuff, but Zoom is really falling off. Unless, of course, they're out.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the time people don't have the right audio video stuff. It's just shitty anyway. It's like this is, I know it is, but I can never see it.
You can't do it. It's hard. I tried to let them know.
I was chatting.
Oh, good, thanks. Okay, should we?
Yeah. That's your favorite thing to do. I can't. I was gonna say, don't your cheeks turn red.
Yeah. Go into a reaction. Yeah.
Okay. So hang in there, not much longer. Looks like I've lost a few. So what I'm doing is I'm just continuing the discussion about reporting a little bit. Let me know what's worth your time. So we were on the page showing cash versus accrual, basically when we finished. A little blurb in the middle there, and then there's a heading reporting specifics. And there are a couple screenshots on that page. And I'll just throw this out there. You know how to customize report and filter reports. I mean, I've been doing that through some of the examples that I've shown. So you feel pretty confident in that? Yes, no, maybe? Confident? So I guess based on your question that you had, always remember, gosh, there's so many of those fields by which you can filter, right? And that's what I was trying to kind of demonstrate, right? Open bills, getting zero amounts out, stuff like that. And I'll show some other customization with reports. How are you with memorizing reports? Are you on track with doing that? So I'll just show you a tip, and this is on that next page. The heading at the top has a number 4, creating groups and memorized reports. Are you creating groups for your memorized reports? It can be handy if you're not doing that. I'm just going to go to reports, and I'm going to go to memorized reports and my memorized reports list. And what I have there is just an idea for you. You see how I have kind of a number 1 in program reports. And then when I memorize a report, I'll put, you know, that report into the right group. And by putting numbers in front of those names, it just moves them up to the top of your list, right? So that your reports don't get alphabetically organized in your memorized reports list. And so adding groups is an easy thing to do from your memorized report list. So I'm just going to create a new group. I'll be very creative within my name there. So you can see how that can organize those. Mhm.
Is there a way that you can, like, if you're printing the same reports for every board meeting, is there a way that you can just like mass?
You can. And so,
You click like 3 buttons and all your reports for the board meeting.
Oh, really? When you do memorized reports?
Let's do that.
I have 0 memorized reports. I need them. I need them.
so create groups, like you might want to create a group called One Board Reports.
Yeah.
And you may want to memorize those reports that you need. You may have a group for program managers or whatever you call them, or maybe you are the program managers in your organizations. So you can create groups, and then, for example, let's say I call this 3 board reports or monthly board reports or whatever you want to call it. So I create that list, and then let's say you want a balance sheet to be in there. And so you can memorize that balance sheet, and you can save it in a group. Right? So if you had modifications to that report, you know, any filters or whatever, right? You would put those in if you wanted to customize headers and footers, because you want to call your P&L something different, you know, like, what do you call your P&L status, financial status, or you can probably call it something different. So you'd memorize those. And then, so I'm just kind of showing you those screenshots. When you want to run a memorized report, right, then you find it here. And then all of that customization that you did, then you'll have it. So this is just, you know, one program. So I had filtered it to that class.
So if I'm doing like a P&L and a balance sheet and an accounts receivable save, can I then go to that report list and then just?
Then you
print
pro
and it will-
then you process multiple reports.
Okay, and then do.
And then you find the group from that. Because it gives you a secondary screen, and then you just find that group.
See how I picked that group?
And how did you
adjust the dates?
So
Process.
And then you can print them. You can display them for yourself.
So it's reports.
You can also, you can also email. Now so you can see that, you know, you can actually, and some people have the board's email addresses saved like somewhere in a Word document on their desktop, because you can actually have emails separated by a comma and a space so that you could distribute them quickly if you wanted to do it via email. You have to have your email set up in QuickBooks in order to be able to email things out. So it's kind of a 3-step process. Do you do it the same way I just showed? You have a memorized.
I don't email them, but yes, I do the process multiple reports.
Mhm.
The only thing I was gonna add was, like I said, I meet with my treasurer before my board meeting. So the top report for my process multiple reports is my P&L. And I have a footer inserted on there that has a space for my signature and his signature that just automatically puts at the bottom of that top report. And then
You just have them initial, they will be so impressed if there's a line. Only they look what I learned.
So do you have that on the extra footer line? Is that where you put that?
don't remember.
And so on the customize report button, right? That's where you're gonna have those tabs. And there is a header and footer tab there for you. And I get this from some people that board members complain that they can't see the numbers,
Yeah.
right? And so you can go to fonts and numbers and you can change font here. So I'll change it to 12 or something.
Blowing their minds now.
You know how many complaints I get about this?
And you see change, I've heard it before, change all related fonts, because there's so many choices there. It's like, where do I start with that? And I'll just click OK.
I like export it out to Excel, F around with it. Make it bigger.
Oh, seriously?
Oh, no,
Oh, my
I
God.
don't. This is, yeah, this is great.
So there's a lot
That's all
here. There's
customized.
a lot here in custom reports. And I'm just assuming, you know, that's where you put the lines for your signature and the extra footer line. Well, can you edit one?
Yep, that's what I'm pulling up real quick.
Okay.
But my QuickBooks.
I don't know how big. Oh, wait.
Black screen of death in QuickBooks. I've never seen it.
Mine keeps shutting down on me. I'm not sure why.
It's making me
Not, I don't
nervous.
have it on this one.
Because I'm also recording the. For some reason, it won't let me use my reports.
You're all together. too,
Okay,
like,
so
yeah,
do you see how I have initial 1 and initial 2 down here?
I don't see that. You can
But
put-
I
you
don't
can
see
put a
my-
line in there too.
I did put a line in there. I don't know why my lines aren't showing.
I
Hmm?
bet it shows up in your-
I wondered that, I was just gonna say that, when I print it, may print the line.
Did it go on to the next page?
Oh, because QuickBooks has a software update. That's why.
So it's in the footer, so it's gonna print on every page.
Right.
Well, you know,
That's the
you can put it on
downside.
either the first page. or the
Yeah,
last
but
page,
it's only gonna print.
And you just have them sign one.
I just haven't signed up for.
Yeah.
I've never done
And
that
then I
before.
only put it on whatever.
See at
It's
the
only in.
bottom, print
Oh.
the
That
bottom,
font one,
first page.
Which I
Oh, look at
have
there,
my
you can
P
do
numbers.
Oh, yeah, yeah, you can't change that. I did mine so long ago, it's probably before they had that option.
Oh,
Down the
hey,
bottom.
oh, I'm sorry. Print footer on first page, but
So
mine
if
went
you
on.
don't click that, it would print it on the last page.
No, print it on every page.
Okay, well, let's see. See how I have my
Mine
lines.
wasn't on the last page.
I didn't even know you could. make it do
See
just
the
on
two
first
things I
page.
changed?
Yeah.
I just took off print footer on first page. When I,
Maybe I only have one page when it comes to some of the reports I do. I don't have that.
well, I made it really big, right? So that's why I'm on multiple pages.
Okay.
Oh, look at
Not on
that.
the first page, okay. So if you had a 4-page report, would it only print on the last page?
Obvious, that's my assumption.
I think I did my lines so long ago, that was before you had that option, so.
Her lines showed up.
You have some time after.
What line did you use? Just the underscore?
Yeah, I did just do exactly. For whatever reason. it worked out.
It's because I'm attached to all of this.
Yeah.
When I look at mine, when I detach, I'll be okay. Okay. Gosh, I wonder if there's anything else I should show. Any other email or like reporting tips that you all want to share?
I have a really great report that my board loves, that's based off of the general journal report, that's modified. It's literally modified down so far that it just shows every transaction, lists every transaction for each account. And that's all it shows. I mean, they love it because it's a 1-page report. It's really simple. It shows everything for the month. And
So it's this report?
I think it's the general ledger.
Oh, okay.
report. And then you go in, you customize it to get rid of like the non-zero accounts. I'd have to go back and look at it. I've tried to export it as a template, and
Mhm.
I have that file goes back to 1997.
Oh,
So there are things that have changed that it won't allow me to export it as a template, but I can figure out how to make it happen if anybody's interested in that report. Somehow I did, was that back in 2002? Because that was one that we did for that 2002 statewide training for QuickBooks. That we did the one in Miles City and the one in Helena. So I don't know. I can figure it out though.
that sounds like a good to do.
It was a really great report. It's simple. Board members like
Mhm.
easy to read.
Good. Simple is good.
It would export it as a template. Will yours export as a template? Mine said something like,
Does everyone use the reports to track their inventory and like when you're reconciling that?
reconciling.
Yeah.
I don't use that for inventory at all.
For like, that's all your MacBooks, that's what.
Or like your trees, do you input your PO and then receive the items and then enter your bill? So how do you track what you have?
I have it on like that. It's all like. sold within.
So like, how do you know what's coming? Like if you're ordering from 4 different nurseries, how do you track? I got lilac from here, I got carrot damage from
I
there.
do their orders and just copy and paste them into Excel. And then I take all my customers and just add line items in them. So then I have like a master sheet.
So do you not do your invoicing to your customers out of the
Yeah.
So it kind of sounds like you're doing it twice, because you can do all that in QuickBooks. You can enter your PO when you place the order. And then you receive the items when you actually get your shipment.
Can I?
And then when you,
What they send me.
when your customer purchases things, then it automatically pulls it off your inventory. And then,
How do you go in and like, opinion, like that?
well, yeah, but it's one line item. That's lilacs, but
So every different type.
because I go back and review those reports and say, oh, look, I bought surplus of this kind of tree hasn't been doing well, so I'm no longer going to order surplus this tree. I'm able to run reports and look at how different things have done.
We're talking about inventory processing now. I'm just letting you know.
Inventory, okay.
So what I did was I just turned it on. I turned on the ability to do
What she's doing.
what she's doing. Because when whoever set up the company initially, if they don't turn it on, you won't see those icons.
Okay.
So you won't know that you can do it, basically, unless you Google it,
How do
right?
you turn it on?
You turn on inventory.
See, items and edit preferences. Items and inventory. You know how in preferences, you can have user preferences and you can have company preferences. This is a company level preference. And it was like this when I started today, nothing was checked. And when you check it, it activates that capability.
Hers is not turned on.
And then you'll get to see that you can do purchase orders, you can enter bills against those items. So tracking inventory in basic QuickBooks is very rudimentary. You know, you don't have the choice of LIFO or FIFO or anything like that. It does averaging for the inventory asset value that will be on your balance sheet. It just uses an average price
So like where I
or
have
cost, excuse me.
this, yeah, like I start that out of this week. Start.
You could.
Or I guess, like say I'm ordering landlord books, I will go in. and do like.
Yep.
That's
And the thing.
There's more to it than that.
Yeah,
There's more to it than that. Tell us what there is.
but one thing that I really like about it is I input, this is what I'm paying for this tree. This is what I'm charging for this tree. So at the end of my tree season, I can run reports and be like, okay, here I need to increase. I don't have enough of profit margin.
I guess we do that too, except we just don't break it down by. Because we pre-order, so I think it's so.
But like
When
with
we
your
order
fabric
extra,
and your
like, we
maps and whatever else you sell, you can put in, like your preferred vendor. So like, I don't know, I utilize it.
So if you choose to track inventory, you have to set up inventory items. Okay, so the theory is, you know, just kind of on a global level, maybe, you know, you have a warehouse and you have inventory in it, right? And so that may not be the case for you if it's all pre-ordered, but you still have to have an inventory item set up, right? So that when you buy it, it starts doing the entries on your balance sheet. So you'll start seeing, you know, an inventory asset value go up as you accept the trees and pay for them. And then when you sell them to the customer, then that will go down.
So where she's saying she does it all in Excel right now, is that something that's importable? Is
Sorry, I
an
think that's
inventory
mine.
item list?
Sorry, it's embarrassing. That's my attorney. That's a scary call to cancel. No, I'm trying to do my will. So yeah, I know, I'm very arbitrary. I'm not gonna die. I fit, and well, I might. Anyway, wow, what a tangent. Woo! We're talking about death.
We've been talking QuickBooks too long.
So, yeah.
So yes,
So-
no.
With inventory, there are all sorts of inventory reports that you can, you know, run. I mean, it opens up this, you know, whole engine of tracking that. So it's an opportunity. You know, when you buy it, it goes into cost of goods sold, right? You know, so there's more to learn with this, but it is a capability that QuickBooks has. The one caveat is never go negative. Don't sell anything before you receive it. Because then your average starts getting really whacked. So that's just like, warning, don't do that.
So is that something that she could import from her Excel
Oh,
that she currently has? It's okay.
What you can import from that form we saw earlier is only the inventory items. If you had a list of inventory items, so I'm getting into that multiple form now that I turned inventory on, I have the ability to do that. And so you can see if you had an Excel spreadsheet of all the trees or whatever you sell, you could import certain columns. That's what you can import.
But then you can also go in there and do mass editing. I pay, you know, I sell all of these for $2. And you can mass edit that and then just adjust your costs.
The way to mass edit it would be first to do it in Excel and then do the copy paste into this form.
But if anybody wants to see how I have that all set up for my trees, I'm happy to show you. I feel like it has really helped me. Especially this year when the price of so many trees went up.
Okay,
When you order or when you enter in a purchase order, first of all, will it automatically then go over into like a bill to pay?
it will, when you go to enter the bill for the vendor, you'll see a list of open POs by that vendor name, and you just click on the PO and it will flip it to the bill form. You can skip the receive items in step.
Yeah.
That's if you have a warehouse and you have somebody looking at the bill of lading and checking off the items. You can skip that step and just go to enter bill and pick the PO.
And in order for it to be something you can select as a PO, it's gotta be set up as an income account.
The PO itself is a non-posting transaction. It's just like if you did an estimate. Some people do an estimate form to give to grantors to show kind of the budget request. It's a non-posting transaction. Please, I'm sorry.
So PERS is set up under service, and then when she goes to do a purchase order, it says it won't do it because it's an inventory. So I have to have inventory.
Inventory. You're buying it could be a non-inventory part.
Okay.
And so some people choose to do non-inventory so that you don't turn on all of that asset tracking. And you don't have to do the inventory adjustments. Like if you had a tree and it died, right? You have to adjust the inventory part to make it and write off that tree as a loss. Or get a credit from a vendor, right? You know, and apply it to the next bill.
See, and again, I do that because I want to see what trees we had to write off because, you know, my bundle of 25 actually had 24 in it or whatever the situation was. I want to be able to track that stuff and run reports off of it. My board could care less. If I print them a bunch of reports, they look at me sideways, but I like having the information. I mean, I just put it in a different format.
So it sounds like anybody who's interested in inventory tracking, you have a go-to person here. So thank you for that. So what I wanted to do is I'm just bringing up a profit and loss by class report, which probably most of you are doing, I'm assuming. And you probably know that you can collapse if you have sub classes and you want to collapse those to streamline a report, you can do that. You know, that would only be available like admin unrestricted, right? It doesn't have any subs. So that's why you can't do that collapse capability. So that's by class, which is traditionally by program. And then, of course, if you don't classify something, that's going to land in your unclassified column, right? So that you could double click on those and put them where they need to go. We usually save unclassified for the mistakes that we make, right? So that we know we can go to that column, find the transaction, and put it into, you know, by using drill down, right? And entering that into a class. And then just to slice that a different way, if I go to company and financial, this would be a profit and loss by job, right? So we talked about that other view if you chose to use customers and having your grants as the jobs within customer. So that you could see those as separate columns, right? Or you could collapse them down to one customer level. And that's probably when a grant is used for more than one program, which is when that really becomes a great way of reporting. Do you know about commenting on reports? Okay. Do you know how to comment in Excel? Okay, so it's Excel-like. So if you were presenting, this report and you wanted to add a comment to something, I don't know, let's say this private grant of $25,000, I could click comment on report. And that opens up these little call outs so that you could go to a specific number. And if I click that call out, I could add a comment.
Is that available on any of the reports?
Mhm.
That's really good. So is it print? Is it-
Uh-huh. What I'm going to do is click save. So one step here is basically when you comment on a report, what you're doing is really making a copy of it. And what you could do, if you wanted to, is simply print this report. And very much like one of the Excel options is printing the comments on a page of its own. That's what we have here, right? So we can see that the comments would be just listed. So not as helpful as what we have in Excel. I think your example of when you have the treasurer come in and review things makes sense, a lot of sense to me. So you could put your comments on a report, and then when you're reviewing them with others, what you could do is save this report. And it will be tagged with the date that you save it. And I'm going to click OK. And so if I close this report, how I get back to that one with the comments is I go to reports, commented reports, and I'll see the reports that I've created that have comments on them. So I see it a lot when, like bookkeepers, are trying to explain something to owners, that's a classic example that I see. They can save those comments so that when you get to that review period, then you have them. So if I were to do this report again, obviously the comments wouldn't be there because I saved them as a separate report. Kind of a nice feature that
Yeah,
was
when you're trying
added.
to explain budgets or something to a board of supervisors who don't really get it, that would be really helpful.
On there, they question me about every time, I just start feeling. What that figure is, where it comes from.
So that was the last that I was going to go over with reports. Anybody want to add anything to that or talk any more about maybe special reports that you use that are useful, shortcuts?
He's the budget, profit and loss.
Okay, we're going to get into budget now. How many of you are using QuickBooks to budget? Was that? Oh, oh, we too. Okay. How many are budgeting in QuickBooks? Okay, maybe about half of you. So if you're new to budgeting in QuickBooks, and by the way, we're back to the handout that you have a printed copy of. And I believe you're on page 6. So budgeting in QuickBooks is found under company planning and budgeting, and you go to set up budgets. And on this page, I have a screenshot of what you're looking at on my screen. And so when you open it up, it will be basically sitting on where you last were. And if you click the down arrow in this screen, you'll see a list of some of the basic budgets that you have completed. So for example, I'm in profit and loss by accountant class. That is the type of budget that I created. And you see that that opens up a class field. And the last budget that I was looking at in this view where you set it up is this particular class, some kind of workshop. If I wanted to edit a budget that I had already created for a different program or class, I could click the down arrow here. And this is how I would navigate to get to another budget if I wanted to edit that information. If I haven't set up any budgets in QuickBooks, I can go to this Create New Budget button. And this is where I begin the process of creating a new one. So the first thing that I do is I select a year that I want to create the budget. And then I pick a budget type. Profit and loss is usually the budget type that people create. Any of you doing a balance sheet budget? Yeah, I don't know many people who use it.
What would you use that?
That would be more like a kind of a cash projection rather than income and expense. I'm going to show you the cash flow projector. I don't know if any of you use that or not, but that isn't an annual view of the cash coming in. It's only a 6-week view. It answers questions like, can I meet payroll, kind of, but it's a very short-term view. Actually, in other versions of QuickBooks, riveting, there's actually an additional forecasting capability, but I think that you have to have higher levels of QuickBooks to get that. So you choose the type, and then you decide what you want to budget by. And this is kind of the idea of if you did a grantor, like I'm picking customer job here and clicking next. So this is the idea of creating a budget by grant, if that was something that would be useful, rather than by program. So apparently that had already been created. So I'm just going to go here because I want to show you something else. So I'm going to do profit and loss. I'm going to do it for the next year. And I'm going to pick class as an example. That would be a program level budget. So when you haven't created that for the year or for that type of budget, right, like profit and loss or class, then I get to the next capability in creating a budget, which is creating it from scratch or having QuickBooks fill in a budget from the previous year's actual data, right? So that's your choice. I'm not going to get anything to fill in because I don't have much here. But, oh, I guess I do have some anyway. So what I can see is I can see that based on actuals, there was an individual donation of a certain amount of money that hit in a certain month. And so QuickBooks is just taking that actual data and plugging it into when it occurred. Okay. So that is a choice that you have when you're creating a budget.
So what do you use that class?
I think that was one. 3,000 feet? We just have it, my general class, it's just operations. For no one, but
Maybe I did that for that class.
Yeah.
I renamed some things
Yeah.
to make it more sense for me, but anyway. I just picked a different class for that year. And so we can see that there was some workshop income that came in February of prior year. And so that's how we do it.
I have a question
Mhm, mhm.
about managing grant funds and using the budgeting. Because I messed up one year and we had like $18,000 from this grant that I didn't realize was just in our checking account. And we ended up spending it in the next fiscal year. And so can the budgeting help with that? For grants that we don't get, I guess we got the money up front for that grant. Usually we just have reimbursement grants.
So the budgeting helps you see when the income from grants might be coming in and when your expenses generally hit. And you can, like the big reason to set up a budget is so that you can do a budget to actuals report. Like this is what is budgeted for that program. When the income's coming in, when with the expenses. And so the second half of budgeting, so that's where we set up a budget. And then what we do is we report against the budget that we set up. And so if I go to reports, I can go to budgets. And the first budgeting report is an overview. So when I click that category, it says, what kind of report do you want an overview for? And so I'm just going to pick fiscal year 22 to 23 overview by class. And when I click next, I can pick account by month or account by class is what people would normally select. And then I can create the report. So this is where I can see on one screen all the budgets that I have set up for a class for that fiscal year and profit and loss designation. So once I create them, the overview allows me to see them. And then of course I could filter down, right? I could filter down and just see whatever class I wanted to look at if I wanted to drive down to that. So that's the overview.
Multiple budgets.
You can have one budget for 1 year for profit and loss for one class. You can have one. You can have a different year, right, for that class, for that budget. And you could have a balance sheet for and a profit and loss for the same year for that class. But you can't have multiple budgets for the same year, P&L by class. It's one. What you can do is, of course, you can export even like a trial balance report so that you have your chart of accounts, or you can even export your chart of accounts list, right, into Excel. So that if you wanted to use Excel for budgeting purposes, then you wouldn't have to build your chart of accounts manually if you wanted more than one, I guess.
Yeah, I'm personally getting confused with a board member who wants me to have all the grant stuff budgeted. We don't get that, like, we have a grant that's lasting for 3 years and I'm gonna use $5,000 every year. I'm just like confused about how to track it over fiscal years.
I can send you my report, 'cause I have. So I just do it as a spreadsheet. Make it my folder. So they can see this is what we've done and here's how much we have.
Yeah, because for my budget, I just put in our mill levy expenses. I don't put in grant stuff too. But he wants us to have wants me to have the grant stuff and the mill levy stuff. It just doesn't. Okay.
It's really easy.
So I just did an actual report. Okay, budget to actuals by class.
That information will still be in my Excel sheet too.
So
Because you can
you
make a separate budget for every class,
can make a budget for every separate class,
but not every.
which
job.
is a program, but you can also create a budget by job.
Oh, that.
You can create a budget by job, and then if you need to report multiple years in actuals, because your current budget year would show the futures, right? And you could even budget the last $5,000 in income or something. It would have to be in that fiscal year, but you could put it in the very last month or something. And you could comment, on the report, or see how I'm turning on comments with budgets. You could comment on the report for that information. So you can change the date parameter to include prior actuals if you want to. So the other thing that I wanted to show that might be helpful with these reports is, you can see that in terms of budget, for for admin, maybe I should go somewhere else here. Okay. So you can see, for John Muir, we budgeted this, but we haven't gotten that yet, right? So we have a negative, right? Because we didn't get that yet. And if I go to customize report, I can go to fonts and numbers, and that's kind of what I'm showing you. Oh, I can show you a few more things on creating it if you're interested. On the next page, page 7. And maybe you don't want to do this, but you can make negative numbers in red. You can say you don't want to see cents because that sort of junks it up in terms of your report. So there is some, some customization that you can do if you want to. I'm going to customize report, and I'm going to advance. That's that other screenshot that I'm showing at below page 7. From the display tab, click the advanced button. And you can also say that you don't want to see some of the non-zero numbers, but that's actually going to be in your budget, over budget, right? Some of these numbers are there because it's showing me that I didn't have a budget. But that'll take some of that extraneous data out of there if you don't want to see it. So there's quite a bit that we can do. That's the big report that people use with budgets versus actuals. When I go to company and I go to planning and budget and I set up budgets, and I'm just going to get into, I don't know, postage. So if I'm editing a budget, I could budget an amount, and I could click copy across, and it will quickly propagate that amount across all months. I could also put a number in, and I can adjust row amounts, either the first month that you're in or the currently selected month. And you can actually increase by a percentage if you want to using that. So, you know, if you're, let's see, should I even say this? If you're adjusting for inflation, 8.5%, you can also decrease by that amount. I could click OK. And it, oh, sorry, and it just adjusted that first month by that amount. Currently selected month, if I pick that, that's what enables me to compound that across the next months. And you do need to have a percentage symbol in there, or it will be a dollar amount. So when I enable compounding, then you can see how that compounds that amount if you need a calculation like that for your budget. So it's pretty basic. I think it can get kind of confusing because the actual year that you're budgeting, and then if it's a profit and loss or a balance sheet, and then if it is at the class or customer job, it sort of becomes like a file name. And then the individual budgets that you create under that parameter are sort of like sheets within that file. But and you have to pick that sheet from this area, right? If it's class, so that you can edit that budget. But then you can use that budget overview report to see them all at once. So it's just kind of a little bit of a weird setup, because I think we're so used to, you know, like Excel files, right? You know, they're saved, we can see where they're saved, and we open them. Should we give a hand for budgeting? How exciting was that? Not really.
My budget's totally the most basic one. I mean, I just go by account. I don't do the class budgets at all.
You don't do, oh, well, your classes are grants.
Well, my classes are the
Right,
detail.
right.
So, I mean, I just do the budget by account. I fill in the first month of the fiscal year with the expected amount, and then I use total only for the year. Because we don't typically have the same amounts every month.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
know, it's minor. I budget for the year, not for the month.
Mhm.
So.
You don't have stuff in the books yet, but I'm planning to do it. And I wanted to mind just like what is that?
So that would be district wide.
Yeah.
Is what she's talking
Yeah,
about.
the
And that-
whole district,
Right.
all of the accounts within the district.
right, so if I were creating a new budget, right, and I'm just gonna pick this year, and I'm gonna click next, no additional criteria.
yeah.
And then you pick scratch or based on actuals.
You know, the problem with doing the actuals is when I'm doing my budget, I'm doing it towards the end of my fiscal year.
Mhm.
So it always pulls from the previous fiscal year. So it's not this fiscal year it's pulling from, which means it's not even close. So I usually end up doing the budget from scratch. And then I'm looking at my
You
P&L
know, mhm.
from my current, like, let's say it's November, because my fiscal year is calendar.
Right.
year. So I look at my November P&L and take a guess as to what it's going to look like for the next year, enter that amount in the January total. And then you can customize your budget report so that it just shows totals.
Right.
Yeah. It's easy.
So she's talking about typing in annual amounts, right?
Yeah, and you have to put it in that July 23 column,
And then copy
Right.
across.
Yeah.
To get the total.
or you just put the total amount in that July 23 column.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And then you you click save,
Mhm.
then you go to your P and L budget versus actual.
And
And
do
instead of doing
total.
the 5 month, you do total.
Total.
Yeah. Because to me, there's no point in trying to guess from a month to month basis what
Mm-hmm.
our transactions are gonna be like for those. Because I might be able to guess January and December for our big tax payments for the county.
Mhm.
But I won't have a clue what the months are between that for that account.
Yeah, and I guess why I was focusing, so thank you for including that, kind of why I was focusing on, job and class is some of the nonprofits that I have worked with really need that.
Right.
They really need the capability of creating a budget for a grant
Yeah.
to communicate with that grantor about what it's going to look like, right? In terms of where the funds are going to go. So, but yeah, if you don't need it, that's how you do just the total. So good. Thank you for that.
Sure. Yeah. I probably got it written up somewhere.
So do you all know how to export reports to Excel? Do you do that quite a bit? And it's just kind of like a click of a button, and it's just a great capability to have, so that you can do, some things that people are talking about here. So we're going to go to page 9. Anybody using the cash flow predictor? And do you have a need to do that with your districts? So small businesses, you asked about budgets. That's why I included cash flow projector. So I'm just going into the projector. It's under company, planning and budgeting, right? It's just the other pick. And this would just be if somebody asks you, what does it look like in the future? It's a 6-week projection. Do we have enough money to cover our planned expenses, right? And the income that we're having coming in.
How's that different from setup forecast?
I have never used the setup forecast, but forecast is for a longer period of time. I read about it a little bit, but I have the 2020 version.
See, I have the 2020 version, but I have the nonprofit,
Oh, I don't.
and
Right. So
I
you
don't
do.
use the nonprofit at home, so I've never even seen that forecast
Right.
option before.
So that, from what I read, and I haven't used it, but it takes you further out into the future, because this is just
It's
a
more of
very,
a long term.
right. This is just like a short-term snapshot. And so you choose what cash on hand you want to use for the projection. You can adjust it if you want to save some cash back, your rainy day fund or whatever. And then you choose if you want to add in this 6-week period. And this is kind of funky to use because it's a little bit off. But let's say in the 2nd week, you plan to get in, I don't know, $500 or something like that. See how it's just going to plug in the numbers based on your anticipation of what you plan to get in. And then I had put this in previously. I just said, oh, I'm going to get $100 expense this week. I might have another expense coming in. I'm just adding these in, right? Whatever. You pick a frequency. You have a mailing or something like that. If you plan to pay your bills, you could, pick that. You can finish your projection. And then it will show you, right, based on your cash and your projected income and expenses, what that is going to look like in terms of your ending cash balance. Wow. You asked for it, Nancy. Okay. So on page 10. So these are things that I just added in because originally when we put this class together, I don't know, we weren't sure how many people were going to take the first class or something like that. And so based on the topics you gave me, I just shoved these in at the end, and you may not be interested. And if you're not, like, tell me, because I'm okay with that. And if you need to stand up and move around, please do so. Is anybody using custom fields? So
Yes.
custom fields. Okay, so a custom field is a field that we can add to certain records if there's something else we want to track about that record. And QuickBooks insanely doesn't have a field for that, right? Because there's so many fields. My example is, and I don't even know if you use 1099 contractors in your districts at all. Okay. So my example was to add a field for the independent contractor exemption certificate expiration date. I know. Woo! I know, it's so exciting. So exciting. Did I add this name in here? So I'll just do this. Okay. So, I mean, the fields are endless, what you have in QuickBooks. I'm just going to go to additional information. And I suppose, I hope I have a screenshot of this for you on the next page, page 11. And so I'm going to click this Define Fields button. And then I can type in my own unique label if I want to. And then I decide what record I want to add that field to, right? Or the list type that I want to add it to. And I'm just going to say vendor. You have about up to 20 of these that you can add, and I'm going to click OK. And this is just saying that you can also add custom fields to certain forms, right? You can customize the template to add a field to a form. So I just created that field. And so I could put in a date like, I don't know. And then I'm going to save this record. So now you could update that if you wanted to, but the idea, and you could memorize this report, would be you can create a list report. I'm creating a vendor contact list report. And it's going to have a lot of columns of data on it. And what I'm going to do is customize that report. And of course, I'm just going to take some columns off. You all know how to do this. And do you see how I can then add my own custom field? And then I can click OK. And I can find Don Miller. And Don Miller would be the only one that I added that date to. Woo!
Well, that would be really useful if you're doing a lot of grant projects and you have to have proof of that information for the grant source. Yeah, if it's expiring, you might do that.
So this is a big deal for a lot of small businesses, right? Because they're using subcontractors or something like that. I figured we probably use some of them. Maybe it's just a little bit, so having it in a folder and checking to make sure you don't get caught on something like that. But that's the idea. So if there's a piece of information that you want to track, sometimes for some clients that I work with, and maybe this might be true for grantors, but maybe on your sales receipt that you're using to get that income in, if they have special data that they want to see on that sales receipt form. So a lot of my clients, you know, their customer, your grantor wants to see like your number in their system, like they have a number for you and they want to be able to match that up. So that is, you know, another idea of what you can do. Because that was the only one that I entered the information in. I added the field and then he was the only one that had it in there.
So is there a way to run the report where it only has if that information is entered?
I see what you're asking. I see what you're asking.
Because what she ran was the full vendor list, so that would be everybody. But is there a way to change it and only if there's that in?
So we just wanted just the one with the date that you created.
Yeah. Let me see. Let me see. So I can filter right to that. But do you see how it's just a blank field? So if I click, you know, I think it's just going to give me everything again. Yeah, because I can't build a parameter for that. Like it's not giving me a date, like greater than a certain date. You know, I could do greater than today's date if it gave me that option.
That'd be pretty cool.
That would be if you could customize the parameter for a field that you create. That would be the way to go. Let's send into it an email. And we'll ask that at the same time. Like, can you please help me change that? Okay, so the other thing that I was going to jump into, so those custom fields can be for vendors, customers, or employees. And you can add custom templates. Do you know how to do that? Like if you wanted to customize a template so that it says, instead of sales receipt, donation or grant received, or do you all know how to do that? So that's what's at the bottom of page 11, and we would turn to page 12. If I go to my list command on my menu bar, I can go to templates. And this is where your list of templates lives. And you can see that there are some, you know, this is on the accounts receivable side largely, the templates that I can customize. And I'm going to go to templates and I'm going to say new. And this is where I pick the basic template form that I want to customize. And so I'm going to pick sales receipt and I'm going to click OK. And that's where we get to that secondary window that's on page 12 in your handout. Kind of the first thing you want to do is this first button. I can manage the templates. And I'm going to give this template a name of maybe something like grant receive template. And then I'm going to click OK. And then in this first area, this is where I can customize things. So if I wanted to add a logo, I think somebody mentioned that before. So this is where you can add a logo that's a file that's saved. Right, so you just search for wherever your saved logo file is. You can customize the information that you have at your company level. And I'm just gonna make this go away. So you can pick what you wanna see on the invoice. Obviously, those things aren't added. You can pick color schemes, blah, blah, blah. When you go to additional customization, and I have that button circled at the bottom of page 12 for you. And if you turn to the next page, this is where you get to decide what columns of information and what fields you want to include. So for example, maybe it's all ACH, automatic deposits. I don't need check number. I don't need projects. See how you can pick if you want to see it on the screen or print. So I can change some of that basic information. I can also change the title. Grant received. You can decide the columns that you want included. Maybe you don't need quantity as an example, so you could just take the quantity out. You might not even need rate. So you might take that out. Oh, there's my phone and email fields that are blank. We'll move those around. In the footer area, you can have a custom message. You could also have a long text message. And so nonprofits use this because they use the sales receipt if they're getting a donation, and they use that as their advice to the customer. This is our tax ID number, right? They might put all of that in the long text disclaimer. So that would be boilerplate text that would go on every one of these templates that you would use. So the next thing that we do, and I have that circled on page 13, this layout designer button. And this is where you go to move things around and put them where you want them to live, right? So maybe you don't want your district's phone number. So I'm moving the phone number field. I just use the shift-click command to pick them both. Maybe you want that up there, right? So there's a label field as well as an example of where the phone number would be. And maybe I don't want my email there either. So again, I'm just selecting both the label and the entry to move those fields wherever I want those on the form. I mean, this is endless, which you probably know. You can change borders and fonts and blah, 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 right? So you can waste a lot of time or maybe have fun with that form. And so what I'm just going to do is click OK here. I'm going to click OK again and again. And I'm going to see that that template, right, the grant received template is now on my list. So if I were to go to my actual sales receipt form, you can see the last time I used a template there, it was the sales receipt form that was customized to be a donation. And so if I wanted to select the one that I just created, then I would pick that grant received. So on the forms that you saw, right, invoice, maybe you're using, maybe the sales receipt form, maybe some are, you could have custom PO forms if you needed them. You would look in that template field on those forms to pick the custom template that you wish to use.
I know that I changed it at one point, and I don't remember where I did it. How do you change what the default?
It's the last template you use and save
Okay,
will be what's there.
will be when you create a new invoice.
Right.
So you can't go back and make it a different one. It's just always going to be
It's gonna be the last one that you use.
Oh, that you used. not
That you,
created.
not that you created, that you used in a transaction that you actually saved. It will remember the last template you used. Okay, home stretch, last thing, you may not care. Tell me if you don't care. Then we'll get to any questions that you might have. Did you know that you can integrate with Microsoft Word as well as Excel? And so I'm gonna go to company, prepare letters and envelopes. And so if, like, this is literally snail mail, and this is mail merge with Word. This is what is happening, but it's using data and reports from Excel. And so honestly, the only thing that I know that small business owners use this for would be collection reports. You know, and you know, collection letters. You can see that you can do collection letters, customer letters, employee letters, you know, letters to other names. If you had volunteers or something like that on your other names list, that might be something that would be worthwhile to you. I'm just going to pick collection letters. Oh, sorry, I guess I'm not. It can't find them with your company, and I don't know where they would be. So, you know, it's just mail merge with Word. You have on collection letters, you have maybe 5 different letters that you can choose from, like a nice letter, a medium nice letter, and we're sending you to a collections organization letter. And then when you pick the letter template that you want, you click next, and a window will actually appear that will show you all the customers that owe you money, and you can actually pick and choose which ones you want the letter to go to. You can filter by greater than 120 days or something like that. And then when you click OK, that's when the mail merge happens with Word. It opens up Word. And so the customer information from QuickBooks is filled in. The list of outstanding invoices, dates, and amounts are filled in. So it's kind of nice because all that data entry that you've done, you can leverage that if you want to generate letters. So just so that you know that it's there. And we have time for more best practices discussions or questions. Are you burnt out from today? This is your time, so. Good. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Learn something useful today?
Absolutely.
Good. Okay. Good. Good.
I guess another question I might have, Allison, is if people want individual help, can they contract with you to have that help? Okay, cool. I don't know anybody else to go to for QuickBooks questions besides you people. You people.
No, I agree. The person they used prior to me,
Totally.
I knew more than she did when we started going through things, so.
That's the thing that can be scary. Yeah.
It was, she was the one doing our audits, and I'd call and ask her why she was doing something some way. I said, well, couldn't we do it this way? She goes, oh, yeah. Well, that makes more sense. Do you have a list of your rates or something that people, if they wanted help, can take to the report?
You know, I charge between $65 and $100 an hour.
Perfect.
Sorry, travel to people, or do you do whatever?
I would do it via Zoom because you guys are all over, right? And it would be cost prohibitive probably for me to travel to you.
Unless you'd like to come to Jordan, Montana.
Where is Jordan, Montana? Sorry, I'll look it up. Where's my phone?
That's awesome.
Oh, fun.
I'm a couple hours further, so you're not bad.
Yeah.
Do you have like an initial setup cost? Like the initial meeting review phase?
Like a new customer.
Yeah.
You know, it depends on the project size, but usually how I do that is maybe I don't charge if it's a serious inquiry. Like for the first 30 minutes, we're just figuring out what I know, what you need. And so it's usually, that's just on me, you know, the first 30 minutes, the, you know, clock, the meter isn't on, as they say.
Hey, I will say in regards to that employee organization grant that we got from DNRC has some money in it. I don't remember how much for assistance like that.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
If your district needs to confer with somebody to figure something out with your accounting, there is an amount of money in that grant. So I just have to figure out how we're gonna make you call for that funding, I guess.
Justify it, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a non-quick question before we just?
Please do, yes.
Oh,
Is that like a handout, or did you have someone who's gonna talk to us, or
No.
like, can I access that somehow? 'Cause I'm
Yeah,
really
all it
interested.
was, when I was going out doing, my visits to new employees, I was just going over, the best ways that I have been working with my board, and having all those documents that we kind of talked about, but Teresa started going over my document, and was like, well, that's wrong, and that's wrong.
I
And
did
so-
not do that.
It was helpful, it was super helpful. So
I
I think,
asked a question of why you do it a certain way, and then I was just informing you.
yeah.
Montana
It
code.
was wrong, like legally, my things are wrong in my contract. And so I think that
Thank
we
you.
should have.
Thank you all out there.
I think
We're-
we should have a policy.
Make sure there's no
Something about it. Because after I
Yeah,
started
let's
thinking about it, I
plan
was like,
something for convention.
God.
Yeah.
yeah, we could have a whole hour conversation.
Yeah,
Probably
I would-
2 hours, I would
I would
think.
sit through that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested.
But yeah, that was the hope, and then I
We could-
realized.
You know, we could try to incorporate some of that board development stuff that Liz did at our set training into that as well.
Yep, and we had at convention a couple years ago, we had a board member responsibility.
No,
Yeah.
it's down to
Yeah.
just the three of us, so I
Okay.
guess there's no questions out there.